Leng Mo gave everything he got. Suddenly, his charm began to glow. It began transforming him, and Taylor was taken aback. Bing Yu didn't know what was happening. Leng Mo had changed into a set of armor. Taylor could not believe that he had managed to absorb his fireball. Leng Mo was relieved to be safe. He had no idea that the armor was this strong. Bing Yu asked him if he was okay and told him to never scare him like that again. Taylor had knowledge about his armor. It was apparently the dwarf's red dragon armor. He asked him who he was to have a dwarf's relic with him. Leng Mo told him it didn't matter who he was because Taylor was going to be dead soon enough. Taylor decided he would fire his strongest spell at him and shouted at him to die. Leng Mo didn't flinch one bit and calmly stood his ground. As the fireball approached him, he simply raised his arm in front of him to stop it. The fireball was completely absorbed. The red dragon armor was apparently immune to fire magic. Taylor thought this was impossible. He was just a great swordmaster. There was no way he could withstand such a spell, even with divine armor. Leng Mo told him it was true that they were weak compared to him, but he had to blame himself for being a fire mage. This was because he had 0 physical attack, and now, luckily, Leng Mo was 100% immune to fire magic. Taylor warned him to not be foolish since they were in the capital. If he were to unlock his spatial magic right now, the guards would see them and bring them down. Leng Mo ordered him to quit acting so bossy. He was not the only one who knew spatial magic. Leng Mo was also a student of the great spatial mage Langer Dorst. He informed Taylor that he was in his space right now. Taylor began to panic, asking him if they could talk things out. He tried making excuses, saying that he had only done this because it was an order. He told him if he let him go alive, he swore he would bring him a lot of benefits. Leng Mo didn't seem to bat an eye and told him it was not possible anymore since he knew that he was the evil lord. He had even seen his red dragon armor, so it was not his fault that he knew too much. Taylor yelled at him to not look down at him and began desperately firing spells. Leng Mo was still standing in the same spot and didn't bother to move from his place. Without a moment's notice, he leapt straight at him. Taylor began screaming in fear, saying that he didn't want to die. Leng Mo slashed him with his sword, and he let out one final noise before dying. Leng Mo noted that great mages were tough. They could have died if they had made one wrong move. He thanked his armor. Phoenix asked him to leave Taylor to him. It would be a waste if he were to leave all those condensed fire elements here. Leng Mo told him to do whatever he wanted, but asked him to leave his body. Bing Yu asked him what they needed his body for. He told him they were going to send it to Caesar, reminding him he that was going to fake their deaths. They could create an illusion using Taylor's corpse and say that they had died fighting against him. The only problem was that they would later have to sneak into Caesar's castle. They arrived back at the royal palace and informed Caesar of their deed. Bing Yu told him that it was just by luck, but Leng Mo insisted that he had estimated them. Caesar didn't care about any of that. He was feeling ecstatic hearing such great news. Taylor was still a great mage, and there were only a few in the continent that could fight him. He figured Leng Mo must have had some sort of a divine weapon to be able to defeat him so easily. It didn't matter to him, though, since they were on his side. Taylor's death was only going to further weaken Brunate's force. He praised them and told them that they could now use Taylor's body as false evidence. He would go ahead and fake their corpses. Leng Mo thanked him. He told him that they wanted to go back to Skyway City to inform their masters about their apparent deaths. That way they could trick Brunate into believing it. Caesar thought it was a wonderful idea. With the help from a sword saint, Brunate would finally be able to settle for a bit. He decided he would go ahead and work things out while they disguised themselves as soldiers. They would then follow Fragrant Empire's merchants back to Skyway City. They got back and informed their masters about what had happened. Firely was glad of him, still not able to believe that he had defeated Taylor. Bilinasi, on the other hand, began furiously scolding them. She asked them if they were crazy, fighting a great mage like that. Even she wasn't sure that she could defeat him. Leng Mo told her she was right. They had merely taken advantage of close combat this time. He assured her that they would avoid enemies like this the next time. She told him she didn't care how they had done it, but before becoming a sword saint. They were not to challenge a great mage. It was too dangerous to do so. She added that they would later give each of them a life-saving item. Firely reminded her that they already had plenty of items. She told him he was so cheap. He finally agreed to do so, saying he would give Leng Mo another item. Leng Mo told him to not worry about it too much since he already had a new one. He informed them that they were heading to Sunset Empire for a secret mission. Caesar had faked their deaths for them. He told Firely he could take advantage of their fake deaths and ask Brunate for some cash. Firely thought it was a wonderful idea. Taylor was a fire-great mage, and he must have had a lot of magical items that he could use. He decided he would just take all of his belongings. Leng Mo asked him to just not make it seem too suspicious. He wanted them to keep the truth of their death quiet and not even let Dayer know about it. Firely assured him he would handle it after they were gone from Skyway City. Leng Mo and Bing Yu headed to the border of the Sunset Empire. The Sword Saint couple made their way towards the royal palace a few days after the assassination incident. Brunate had not expected Taylor's failure and insisted that he was the mastermind behind it, trying to make it seem like it had nothing to do with him, but they still managed to give him a hard time. Meanwhile, Leng Mo and Bing Yu had arrived at the Sunset Empire. Leng Mo pointed to its border. He had really missed this place. It had been 3 years since he had last been here. The memories had begun coming back to him. As he entered the gates, the guard stopped him, ordering him to show them his permit. He was not allowed to enter without it. Leng Mo realized that nothing had changed in the past 3 years, but he couldn't just reveal his identity just yet. He told them he was a friend of General Qianhao and asked them to let them through. The guards refused to believe him. Leng Mo told them they could go and ask. All they had to say was Leng Mo from the Day to Die group was back, and they would see if he was lying or not. The guard recalled that name and informed them that General Qianhao had been promoted half a year ago. Lan couldn't believe it and asked them if it was really true. The guard told him he couldn't say anymore since they could have been spies from the Fragrant Empire. Bing Yu told him to quit chatting and just knock them out. Leng Mo asked him to calm down and decided it was time for him to reveal that he was the evil lord. He hoped that people would still remember that title. Before he could do so, the guards ordered him to get out of the way. The border general was returning, and they had to make way for him. Leng Mo decided he would check out the new general. He looked over to his direction and noticed a familiar man on a horse. It was Red back from the Dare to Die camp. Leng Mo shouted at him, trying to get his attention. Red noticed him and jumped off his horse. He ran straight towards him, asking if it was really Leng Mo. He had thought he would never see him again. Leng Mo told him it really was him. Red had tears in his eyes. The guards were taken aback by what they were seeing. All of a sudden, Red punched him. Leng Mo questioned what was wrong with him. Red told him it was for leaving them without any notice. Leng Mo let out a little laugh, and Red asked him to head back to his barracks so they could have some drinks. He let him know that Yellow, Blue, and Green were also going to punch him like he had just done, and told him that he shouldn't have left them like that. Leng Mo introduced him to Bing Yu, who was his best friend from the Arbitrator Academy. He informed him that they were both arbitrators now. Bing Yu greeted him and told him that Leng Mo's friends were his friends. Leng Mo had noticed that he had changed a lot in 3 years and asked him how the others were doing. Red told him that he had followed General Qianhao for quite a while. He had later been promoted by him when he had left. The others were also doing great, and Blue and Green were now working for him. Blue was apparently the most educated out of all of them and was his staff officer. Green, on the other hand, was a commander in charge of information gathering and assassinating. Yellow had become a merchant, but he still lived around the border. He had already sent for people to bring them over to meet him and told them they should be here soon. He noticed them entering and announced that they were here. Leng Mo turned around to see the 3 familiar faces. Yellow stated that it had been quite a while. They had never thought that they would get to see him again. He laughed, saying he was here now. He could see that they had all become something great. Yellow tried to remain humble, asking him where he had been. They had been worried about him and had even thought of following him at one point. He asked them to grab a seat while they talked and introduced them to Bing Yu. He told Bing Yu that these were his old mates, Yellow, Blue, and Green, who he had fought alongside with in the Sunset Empire. Yellow informed him that he had heard Leng Mo had gone to the forest at the border and had fought with the 4th prince of the Fragrant Empire. Blue continued, saying that the whole of the Fragrant Empire had been targeting him. They had lost track of him after that. Green added that he had even went to the forest to look for him. He had searched for half a year but hadn't managed to find anything. Leng Mo explained that Dorst had recommended him to the Arbitrator Academy. He had gone there to study for 2 years in order to become an arbitrator. Red knew how difficult it was to become an arbitrator, but he had figured it would be a piece of cake for him. He reminded him that the 4 of them had been caught by an intern arbitrator. Leng Mo agreed, saying it was difficult, but both Bing Yu and he had managed to make it, and he was now an arbitrator. Red figured he must have had something to deal with over here since he paid them a visit. He inquired if there was something the 4 of them could help with. Leng Mo admitted he would not hide anything since they were so close. He started by saying that he was here for revenge. His target was the 4th prince of the Fragrant Empire, and he harbored an extreme amount of hatred for him. He had heard that Brunat would be leading the army to attack Sunset Empire, so he had come to see if he could help General Qianhao out and seek revenge at the same time. Since Red was now the general stationed at the border, he figured he wouldn't even need to get assigned to a position. Red could just let him come along with him. Red told him he could do that, but if he wanted a position, then he would have to the military department. Leng Mo rejected his offer, saying that there was no need to make it complicated. Just then, someone asked him to join as an apprentice of his. The man told him that he could get rid of a lot of paperwork that way. Leng Mo turned around to see his teacher, Dorst. Dorst scolded him, saying that he should have called him as soon as he had returned. Leng Mo apologized, saying that he hadn't known he was here. If he did, then he would have been the first person Leng Mo would have visited. Dorst was impressed to see him become an arbitrator. Since he was now back, he asked him to show that knife of his again. Leng Mo asked if he was talking about the evil Lord Slash and inquired why he wanted to see it. Dorst replied, saying that he had been researching a lot for the past 2 years, and that knife of his had some unique gems concealed in it. Leng Mo handed over the sword. Dorst was amazed to see it, and asked him where he had obtained it from. Leng Mo knew that Dorst was his teacher, but he still couldn't reveal any information about the dwarves at all cost. He lied, saying that his grandma had given it to him, but that he didn't know the location where it was from. He had simply heard that the gem was from outer space, and he was not so sure about the others. What he had said was technically true. You didn't actually know where this gem was from. All he knew was that he had arrived in this world after his contact with it. Dorst was glad to hear his answer. He explained that he had been trying to investigate the stone 2 years ago. He had felt a strong force of spatial magic in it, as if it could change the whole world. He didn't know why he could use this power, but maybe it was because Leng Mo was the owner of the knife. He revealed that he had figured out a way to release the power inside, but he didn't know if Leng Mo wanted to inherit the power, since there were some risks involved. Leng Mo agreed to do it. He knew he needed to take on any challenge there was if he wanted to improve. Dorst decided they would get straight to it after the feast. Leng Mo asked him if they could do it right now because he was afraid things might happen after a few drinks. Dorst was fine with that, and they began heading back. They made their way into a range of mountains. Leng Mo asked him why they were there. Dorst informed him that they were doing it here since the high energy release would be enormous. If they were to mess up, then the area could get blown up. Leng Mo was surprised it was that powerful, and started having second thoughts about whether or not he was going to be able to handle it. Dorst explained that it was all about mental power. He told him to wait here for a moment while he went to set up the magic circle. Once the circle was complete, he made Leng Mo stand in the middle of it and told him to take out his evil Lord Slash. He instructed him to put his hand on the stone and then use spatial detection magic. Leng Mo did as he was told, and he noticed a bright glow appearing from the gem. He could tell that there seemed to be a lot of power concealed inside it. It felt so strong now that he was feeling overwhelmed. Dorst completed his spell while the magic stone kept releasing energy like laser beams. He shouted at Leng Mo to seize the moment. He was all on his own now. The beams began striking his body from every direction and were instantly absorbed. The ground below him started to break apart. Dorst shouted at him to back off. Leng Mo was empty-mindedly standing there, releasing all his power. Bing Yu and Dorst were excited by what they had just witnessed. Releasing S7-colored thunder meant that he had advance. Leng Mo was still standing. He had been turned into a sword saint and his aura seemed different. Leng Mo could feel the change. His aura no longer felt like that of a great sword master. Dorst was pleased to see him return safely. He informed him that he was now a sword saint. Leng Mo couldn't believe it. He told him to try out his powers since there was no way the 7-colored thunder could be wrong. Leng Mo agreed to do it and told him to watch out. His aura released with a burst of energy. The loud boom was enough to make the whole mountain tremble. This was no doubt the power of a sword sand. At once, Dorst told him it was enough. The mountain was going to collapse if he had kept on releasing energy. Leng Mo did as he was told, but he informed him he was not used to controlling this much aura. Dorst had not expected him to advance this much. Bing Yu thought he was really lucky. It would have taken ages without his help to become a sword sand. Dorst informed him that he still hadn't released all the powers of the stone. He concluded that they would try it some other time since his thunder was going to attract a crowd. He asked them to come back to his place for some time so he could see how much Leng Mo had improved. A few moments later, 2 men had arrived on the scene. General Qian Hao took a look at what had happened and noted that a thunder had landed here. It seemed that they had already left. He couldn't believe that someone would choose to advance to Sword Saint at the border forest. Now they just needed to figure out whether it was one of their people or the Fragrant Empire's men. Qian Hao's superior asked him if he knew anyone who was going to advance to Sword Saint recently. Qian Hao told him he had no idea, since not a lot of masters stayed around the border. He used to have 2 subordinates before called Red and Green, who were the strongest around, but they were only sword warrior level, so it couldn't have been them. The man suggested he should go back to the military base and ask around. They needed to get the Sword Saint to join them. He decided he would head back to report to the king and told Qian Hao to inform him if he found out anything. Qian Hao headed to the border defense camp to meet with Red. Red inquired what had made him come here. He told him he was going to get straight to the point. He wanted to know who had just advanced on the mountains and asked him if he had any idea. Red didn't know what he was talking about. He explained that a 7-colored thunder had been spotted and asked him if he didn't see it. Red recalled seeing it, but he had no idea that these advancements came with thunder. He didn't remember discharging any thunder when he had advanced. Qian Hao explained that small achievements didn't have thunder. Only ranks such as the Sword Saints came with it. Red was astounded. He remembered something and asked him if he had talked about advancing. This must have meant that their visitor had advanced. Qianhao asked him who it was. Red implied that he already knew him very well. He was just about to take him over to his place. Qianhao was shocked to see his face. It was none other than the Lengmo. He greeted Qianhao, saying it had been such a long time and was hoping he was doing well. Qianhao couldn't believe he was the one who had advanced. It had only been 3 years since he had left. Lengmo asked him to calm down, and he would explain.